In this lesson, you will be able to learn about professional self of the worker who has to help the client in solving his problem. The objectives of the lesson is to know the meaning of professional self, to learn to use the professional self in casework practice. Social worker needs a well-developed professional self in dealing with the problems of the clients more than other professionals. The caseworker works with individuals whose feelings, attitudes, emotions have to be understood and analyzed. Sometimes, in spite of training and her self-control, her feelings and emotions may disturb her in dealing with the problems of the client. But a mature caseworker will overcome such difficulties. It is professional self that is strongly helpful to overcome the difficulties. The worker has to internalize the following aspects and develop the professional self. 1. The knowledge base. 2. The functions of the worker. 3. Use of self. 4. Skills of the worker. 5. Values of the worker. Knowledge base of the worker. The worker gains knowledge of the principles and apply in her casework practice. Acceptance. The worker has to respect the dignity and the worth of the individual. The client may be stigmatized of a chronic disease like tuberculosis or HIV, but the worker will accept him as he is. Sometimes the worker has to accept a criminal or an offender and respect him as an individual. It does not mean that the worker is encouraging crime and offenses. She will see the person as an individual with problem and try to separate problem from him. Acceptance helps in establishing professional relationship. Self-determination. It is easy to talk about respect to the individual and his choices and decisions, but in practice it is difficult to accept others' choices and decisions. Even though the worker can make better choices and decisions, she has to allow the client to take his decisions and choices. Even if the client made a wrong decision, with the experience, he will learn how to choose a better one. Or else the client will depend on the worker and never learn to take independent decisions and choices. The client's participation gives an opportunity to him to think and act independently. This is what we call enabling. The worker needs knowledge of human behavior, policies, programs of the government, and also rich experience in social work research. In addition to it, the worker should develop sound knowledge in theories and models of practice in social casework. Individualization. Human beings have similarities, yet they differ a lot from each other. Individuals are unique in themselves. As the individuals belong to different background, personalities, socioeconomic conditions, their reactions and perceptions differ from each other. Depending on the needs and interests of the caseworker helps the individuals. Theories of social work. 1. Systems theory. Individuals, families, communities, and organizations are regarded as systems with certain common characteristics. Each system has its own equilibrium and growth. Any change in the system will affect the larger system and its functioning. Each subsystem thus has the parts or individuals who interact and influence each other, and it is more than its components. For example, family, which is distinct from its members, all subsystems are interrelated and follow a social order. Thus, several families form a community and several communities a society. Hence, the caseworker will understand individual client and his behavior not only by analyzing him but also his family, neighborhood, etc. Social learning theory. Individuals learn from one another. Observation, imitation, and modeling will help them in learning. Albert Bandura's learning theory explains that people can learn new things and develop behavior. Individual learning is by observing people around and imitating. Their simple observation cannot change the behavior. Attention, that is careful listening, is important. Retention, that is memory, reproduction, reply of information, and motivation, that is repetition, are the steps involved in learning. Psychodynamic theory. This theory explains the way to understand the levels of personality, conscious, unconscious, and preconscious personality, and parts of the personality, the ego and superego, and their interplay producing conflicts. Childhood experiences that have bearing and the conscious motivation that prompted behavior of the client also is to be understood. Cognitive theory. This theory believes in individual thinking, which is responsible for his emotions, motives, and behavior. Perlman's work on casework as problem solving process emphasizes the role cognition in casework process. When perception of the individual changes, the motives or goals will change. When goals change, behavior changes. The caseworker tries to change the perception of the client so that goals and behavior changes automatically. When the client is having antisocial and self-defeating behavior, the cognitive therapy is useful. Models of practice. The psychosocial model. The problems of the individual arising out of weak ego, physical capacity, and lack of resources is tackled by techniques such as reassurance, support, and environmental manipulation to restore his normal functioning and its improvement. The problem solving model. Problem and its causative factors precipitating and reinforce factors of social and psychological areas are analyzed. Clarification is given to client whenever necessary. The task-centered approach. This model is given by William Reid in 1970. It is short-term and time-limited in its application. The caseworker and the client together try to improve work performance or change in behavior within certain period. Behavioristic approach. Human behavior is learned. This approach views maladjustment in the individual that is due to faulty learning. It is a failure in learning. When conflicting situations arise in an individual that is failing to take appropriate decisions, just as behavior is learned, the faulty learning can be unlearned and new coping patterns can be evolved. The modification can be achieved by using the following techniques. 1. Aversion therapy. This technique is used in the modification of the behavior by the method of punishment. Punishment may be given either removing positive reinforcement or by using aversive stimuli. Kontorovich, as early as 1930, has given electrical shocks in the treatment of alcoholics. This treatment is used in correcting drinking, smoking, drug dependence, gambling, and in sexual deviations. Systematic desensitization. It is used in correcting a variety of maladaptive behaviors by construction of anxiety hierarchies and also in giving muscle training. Existential approach. Man is continuously threatened in finding the meaning of his life. In order to fulfill his life goals, he has to find a way to cross the hurdles. If he gives up his goal of life, he has to face anxiety and despair. If he strives to achieve what he wants, he can prove his existence. Caseworkers use this approach to help their clients in fulfilling their needs. Functions of social caseworker. The worker will restore the impaired social functioning of the client to achieve that. She will involve herself in curative and rehabilitation functions. When a partially deaf client comes to the worker, the curative function is applied to the person by suggesting a hearing aid. The client has to adjust with the external aid that is given to him. That we call as rehabilitation. That means she helps the client in treating the problem and also bring him back to normalcy. She provides resources which aim at educating and developing. Education is putting new ideas in the mind of the client to improve his life situation and enjoy better living conditions. Development means the client life at present is not in a distressing situation. For example, husband and wife are living together since 20 years with some differences of opinions, but they are not opting for divorce. The intervention of worker will help them live better, clearing their differences of opinion. Lastly, the most important function of the worker is prevention of the problems. Immunization of communicable diseases, child rearing practices, and care to prevent delinquency, mental illness, etc. Use of self. A trained social worker not only has the knowledge of principles, theories, models of social worker, but she brings in her intellect awareness of her biasing, prejudices. This was given by Banerjee in the year 1991. The caseworker will not work mechanically. Her personal qualities like realistic understanding, awareness of community resources and individual behavior, defenses and complexes are useful in the diagnosis and treatment of the problem of the client. Other professionals like medicine and law will not demand emotions of the learner, but the worker during training itself has to learn to analyze and control her emotions. Though all students are imparted the same content of the subject of casework, the way they understand the content, their mode of internalization of the content of social work differs. The personality of the worker makes the difference. To the worker, human being, that is the client, is important. She has to learn to empathize, that is, try to understand the feelings and emotions of the client, keeping herself in the client's place without involving with it emotionally. The client's defenses, frustrations should be understood. This understanding helps her in establishing a relationship with the client. The worker sometimes play a permissive or assertive role in disciplined way. The permissive role is played by the worker as she accepts the client and listens to him. Here, the worker's permissive role allows the client to express his feelings and problems without any hesitation. Parental or assertive role when the client needs correction. When the client's thoughts and behavior is found to be not favorable to his progress, the worker has to use his parental or assertive role and correct him in the interest of the client. The worker, depending on the situation, has to be kind and firm. The caseworker, while studying the case during interview, shares the feelings of the client while sharing urges, feelings of the client. The worker feels with the client and not like the client. The worker should possess feelings for the client and she should not be possessed by the feelings. If she is in the grip of such sad and hopeless stage, she will not be in a position to help the client. The worker's role is described by using the terms such as knowing and doing. Knowing indicates the knowledge of social casework. How to interview to know the problem, exploring the causes of the problem, and provide possible interventions of the problems of the client. Doing refers to practicing what is learned in the theory. In addition to it, being is added. That means the worker develops a mature personality with special attributes. The profession requires knowing, doing, and being. The last attribute only makes it distinctly different from other professions. Being is more important in social work profession than doing. Why being is more important than doing? Most people identify with their occupations of doing aspect, but these professionals are experts in their work, but they fail to develop the philosophy behind their work. That means being is missing. When the worker comes across a physically challenged person or a delinquent or a foundling, she should not be sympathetic. Rather, she should be in a position to empathize with him. The worker will understand the client's placing herself in the client's position. At the same time, the worker carefully avoids her emotional involvement. She, being a professionally trained person, should be aware of social situation and social problem, and her personal attitudes and attributes are to be used with commitment to human welfare. Knowing, feeling, doing, and being will improve the worker with a professional self. She should identify her feelings, control her defenses, modify her behavior based on the client's reaction. Individuality is invisible but holds mind, intellect, and body harmoniously together. The summation of behavior seen outwardly at different situations, we refer to it as personality. Behavior changes depending on the situation. That is, personality may change, but the individuality that keeps the intellect, mind, and body together will not change. The values related to social work profession has to be internalized and become workers' self. Professional values, knowledge, self-control brings about evolution of change in the professional personality of the worker. Knowledge of human behavior. The worker has to understand the personality of the client while she is guiding him in his problem. The client's motivation to take the help of the worker and improve his situation is very important in worker client relationship. The client's perception of reality, that is, capacity to understand facts, has to be assessed. When the client is not willing to talk about his intimate personal things, or when he is wanted to change his version, he will use defenses. The worker should be in a position to analyze the behavior of the client. The worker, with the knowledge of the growth and development of human beings from the birth, is able to understand his behavior. Knowledge of fields of social work. Knowledge of medical social work, psychiatric social work, community development, correctional social work, family welfare, child welfare, and human resource management is essential for a social worker as she has to work in those areas. Skills of social worker. A new worker, when she entered the professional practice, with the skills they learn, use them depending on the personality and capacity. How the worker will use the skills depend on motivation and interest in helping others. The worker will use her belief system. It is not religious one but method of understanding the world. Worker has to understand the differences between personal views and professional ideas. One general mistake a beginner does is the worker imposes her or his views on the client. Worker should be careful in avoiding rigidity of beliefs, or else she will fail to understand the rights of the client. Basically, the skills that are required of the social case worker are skill in relationship, skill in exploring problems in depth, skill in using resources, and skill in alternate solutions. Skill in relationship. Relationship is very important in social casework practice that requires trust, confidence, and mutual respect in creating a comfortable atmosphere where the worker can ask for information freely and the client can answer without any hesitation. Skill in exploring problems in depth. The worker should possess the skill to probe into the problem by encouraging the client to speak and listen carefully, respecting the client's views, and in showing genuine interest in locating the client. Skill in using resources. The skill of the worker lies in locating and using the resources of the community to the client, and she will help in providing services and material that is needed for the client. Skill in finding alternate solutions. After exploring the problem, analyzing the causative factors, the worker has to move towards solution of the problem. She has to provide alternate solutions to the client. The client will choose the solution to his problem. The worker's skill is evident in developing capacity in the client to solve his problem. The worker also uses relational dynamics in her practice. By recording, the worker comes to know how she is relating herself to the client. Knowing her strength and weakness, the worker can correct herself. By using anxiety and use of disclosure also, the worker can gain good understanding of the problem. Workers' anxiety, how it is affecting the client, and how the anxiety of the worker affects the feelings, thoughts, and behavior of the client has to be assessed. Values of the worker. The worker starts her work as she is fully committed to value of the respect for humanitarianism. The worker with an attitude to help them, she listens to the personal and most intimate problem of the client. Hence, she has to keep the content confidential and cannot use it for gossip. The worker respects the dignity, worth of the individual. She strongly believes equal opportunities for all, limited only by their personal capacities. She enables the client to solve his problem basing on the integrity and competence. This society may look down some people like commercial sex workers, criminals, or people with chronic diseases like HIV, tuberculosis, mental illness, etc. But the worker will not perceive them as society perceives them. As a member of the society, she respects the norms of the society, but as a professional imbibed by the values of the profession, she respects the individual and she will view them as a person with problem and help them to become respectable citizens of the society. To sum up, we can say that as the worker is dealing with the problem of the individual, she should be competent enough professionally. The professional self, evident in her knowledge base, in fulfilling her functions, in using self and skills and values. Unlike other helping professions, she has to control her feelings when she emotionally gets involved in the casework process.